Hello, I'm Pearl Howie, and welcome to Authentic Success Your Way. I hear all the time from people how much they want to go on retreat, so I thought I would bring you to the wonderful Crouchers Orchards Hotel. It's still early, the sun is still coming up, and they're serving breakfast still. But it's a beautiful place to come and take some time out to relax. This is a series of 7 videos, a journey, even what you might call a retreat, a way, a pilgrimage, a Camino. We're going to go to the beach, we're going to go down to the woods, and we're going to find some places in nature where you can relax, let go, and feel safe to feel your own feelings. I've been one of those people that has had success, or what I might call a notion of success. The time when I had the flat, the car, the job, the friends, the parties. But inside, I felt like I was dying. I felt like I was living what we call a living death, because I wasn't letting myself do any of the things that I loved. I wasn't writing, I wasn't dancing, I wasn't being me. I wasn't making films. So sometimes our authentic success is just about opening up to the things that we have closed off. Sometimes it's about making big changes. Sometimes just very tiny adjustments to where we are. But we often feel that we need something else because we know things are just not quite in alignment. Now, I've studied with Native American shaman, and the ancient shaman all knew the truth that the answers are within you. So these exercises, these workshops are just about reflecting back to you what you know inside. So you don't have to do them all, you don't have to do them in order, but they are practices that I have used for many years to find my own way to my authentic success. And we're also going to talk about fear of success. And one thing I have learned is that every single person will face fear of success in their lives. It's the most normal thing in the world. So I hope you'll use these videos as a retreat if you're not able to come away and go on a retreat with me right now. Perhaps one day you will join me here at Crouchers Orchards or another retreat, or find another one that is perfect for your needs. I hope these videos will help you to find your own way, and that I see you down the road on both our ways. Namaste, and I hope you enjoy. See you at the end of the road. Hi, and welcome to Authentic Success Adaptation. So you may not have been in one of these before. This is a hide, and I thought this was the perfect place to come and talk about adaptation, because one of the many ways that we adapt in life is by hiding. Charles Darwin first said, adapt or die, and he was talking about how animals and plants as well change in order to survive in the wild. And it's something that we do as human beings as well. And it's something that we've done, forever. So sometimes what we're also dealing with is the way that our ancestors had to survive, by adapting, by changing, and by hiding their true selves, by hiding their authenticity. We know that for many years, people who were gay or lesbian had to hide their true identity, had to hide if they were bisexual, because it just wasn't accepted, because it was illegal, because people were being persecuted for who they truly were. And of course, at times, people have had to hide their religion. They've had to hide their spirituality. they've had to hide their healing gifts as well. For many years, people were persecuted as witches if they were healers, if they were midwives, if they were a little bit different. And one of the things I've had to accept is that's part of my heritage, my ancestry, and to embrace that now and be able to talk about it openly. And I do that by talking about shamanism, even though there were probably other words that my ancestors used to describe helping people. So in this video, we're going to look at the process, the stages perhaps, of adaptation. We don't necessarily go through all of them, just as we don't necessarily go through all the stages of grief. But by understanding them, we can see a little bit more about how we behave at times, how we hide ourselves, our light, our sexuality, our religion, our spirituality, even what we want to eat, because sometimes it's not that much fun when people are quite negative about people being vegetarian or vegan or even a meat eater. We have a lot of ideas at times, and sometimes we want to push our ideas onto other people, and things get a little bit confusing. So we're going to talk about those different stages or different periods of adaptation. And what we can do is we can see that very commonly one of those stages is coping. And one of the things that can happen with our coping strategies, our coping behaviour, especially if we pick it up when we're very young, is that we believe it's our personality. We believe it's who we are. And so a lot of this work is recognising that what we think of as our identity, our personality, is just behaviour, some of which is really something that we developed as a coping strategy when things got tough, things got impossible, things were unbearable when we were younger, or even when our parents were younger, or even when our ancestors were younger. Sometimes that coping strategy is passed down through generations. So in this video, we're really going to look at adaptation, at coping, at collapse, at recovering, what normal is for us. And what we want to do is, by understanding all those stages, those processes, those behaviours, all of those things, that we reclaim our choice, we reclaim our awareness and wisdom about what we're doing, about who we truly are, about our authenticity and our authentic success. And we can start to just get back to being our natural selves, get back to nature, being true to who we are, and let go of those things that we believe are part of us, but really are just part of a natural process of healing. And when we understand that, we can let go, release ourselves, and we can be truly free to be you and me. One example of adaptation is what we could call acclimatization, which is when we get used to being in a certain habitat, environment, and our body changes. It adapts to that. And a great example is actually climbing Mount Everest, because we don't actually climb Mount Everest in one go. In fact, people climb Mount Everest in about 5 goes, and each attempt you go a little bit higher. And what happens is each time you go a little bit higher, your body produces more red blood cells to cope with the thinner air. And so people go up and then they come down and rest, and their body produces extra red blood cells so that they can go up a little bit further next time, and that they can eventually get to the very top of Mount Everest. It's a great analogy for success, and it really shows how we adapt and change, and how that means that we survive. And as human beings and animals and plants, we change and we can cope with different circumstances better and better. But the important thing about adaptation is that although we get all those extra red blood cells when we go up to altitude, when we come back down to sea level, very quickly our body lets go of them and we get back to a regular level, regular amount. And that's natural adaptation. And our body is really great at recognizing when it needs to adapt, it needs to change, it needs to acclimatize to different environments, different situations. Another example of adaptation is how our skins tan or go darker when we've got more UV around. But when the sun goes, usually the colour fades too. But when we adapt to different circumstances, our mind is not always as good as our body and spirit in recognizing when we can let go of the things that we needed for a time but which we don't need anymore. So as I said at the beginning, one of our coping strategies is hiding. So I'd like you just to spend a few moments very calmly, take a few deep breaths, get centered in your body, nice and easy. And just think of anything that you're hiding, any parts of yourself you feel unable to talk about. And just allow yourself to come out of hiding. And just like here, sometimes we have to be very quiet and watchful, and we have to wait until the things we're looking for surface, until we see those little birds, even those butterflies that we'd like to see in this environment. It's quite magical when they show up. And sometimes we need to give ourselves that permission. We need to give ourselves that, the privilege of our own attention, of our own patience. We look outside at this magical world, but sometimes when we look inside, when we allow ourselves to reveal ourselves to ourselves, that's really, really something very amazing. And it's hard when we've been taught to hide, when we've been punished at times for being who we are. And we have to let go of that and remember that we are in charge of our own destiny. And there's a time to stop other people making decisions for us, to stop other people affecting us in that way. I can't cope. Sometimes that little phrase will pop into our heads. And we could say that is collapse or nearing the point of collapse. Sometimes we just collapse. And we could look at that negatively. It can be very disturbing and it can be very inconvenient when we collapse. When we have to just stop. Maybe we have to go and take time out, go for a walk. Maybe we can't even get out of bed. I've been there. But that collapse is also part of the process. And it's important to remember that collapse is not failure. When we collapse, it's often because we have been going above and beyond for a really long time. We've been doing the impossible for a really long time. Mother Teresa had a great expression that she used. I'll try and get it right, which is we, the overlooked, have been doing the difficult with the least amount of resources for so long for the ungrateful people. that we are now qualified to do anything with nothing for everyone. And I think sometimes we can feel like that. I'm guessing that you have been through that at some time in your life, where you've just been doing so much for other people, even for ourselves. We've been doing the impossible and we collapse. And what's important, I think, sometimes when we hear those little words, those three little words, I can't cope, is hopefully to stop before we get to the point of collapse. But also to think, what does I can't cope really mean? I can't cope financially might mean that we reach out for help. And there are lots of support services. We might ask a friend or a family member for help. I can't cope, or I collapse, can actually be a very powerful spiritual, mental, physical moment. We talk holistically, it's about everything. Because sometimes that collapse is what we could also call rock bottom. And one of the things that people don't necessarily understand about the spiritual journey or our life journey is that sometimes it's when we hit rock bottom that things get so much better. Now for me last year, I ended up in A&E with my migraines. And although it was kind of unrelated to how I figured out what was going on for me and I was able to improve my situation, that moment was very stark, and it made me realize just how bad things could be. So as I started to improve and heal and get better, that stayed in my mind. I didn't want to end up back there. But that collapse was almost inevitable because I hadn't yet found my way forward. And hitting that rock bottom as I went forward meant that every time there was a conflict and I was thinking, okay, I don't have time to look after myself, I have to go and do something for other people, I would stop and I would think, but then I might end up back in hospital. So that collapse was, I guess, an essential part of that growth and that healing. It's the same thing if we hit rock bottom with our finances, with a job. Perhaps, we're in a job and we hit a point where we collapse and we realize we just cannot cope. We just cannot continue the way that we've been going. And that's often when big changes happen. Huge, big, important changes. But sometimes that collapse is just the time that we need to stop and to deal with all the feelings and everything that we haven't dealt with yet. So it could be what we call a nervous breakdown. And thankfully, nervous breakdowns do not have such a bad rap as they used to, We know that people go through them. We know there are lots of reasons why people go through them. People at all levels of society, people who've got important big jobs, people who are doing what other people think is a simple job. But a nervous breakdown can happen for a lot of people when we just get to a point where we cannot carry the load anymore. So thinking again about that journey, having that big rucksack on there, sometimes we get to a point where we just have to stop. We just have to put everything down. And what comes after collapse is recovery. And very often I find it useful to think about it in terms of recovery in addiction, in AA, drug addiction. And people often think about recovery. We talked about it, so much talked about it after the pandemic, as if it's something that happens in a snap. It's something that happens straight away. Whereas if we talk about a recovery program, we know it's going to take time, and we know it's going to take changing the way that we do things so that we don't end up back in the same place, which a lot of us do time and time again until we actually master recovery. And I remember even after I'd done 6 years of training fitness and teaching people that you need to rest after a workout and things like that, I still always struggle with the recovery stage. That's one of the things I find really difficult. And when I learned how to free dive, my teacher was so great, and she was really teaching me, that when you do your breathe ups, you go into your dive, then you come back, you cannot do anything without that recovery stage, because it's when your body recovers from all the exertion. And you can't just keep putting yourself out there again and again, working hard and hard again, without doing yourself some serious damage. Or at least, like in the case of free diving, you can't do a good free dive if you don't allow yourself to have that recovery stage. And as you can hear, it's raining here, it's beautiful. And we've had some really hot weather, all that heat. And then we need that rain to come to get everything wet again, to stop us having those droughts. And we need that rain. But it's not always convenient. We want a sunny day to do what we want to do, but we need the rain. We need the rain for so many reasons. And our plants need it. Our wildlife needs it. We need it. We need that cool time, that calm time. But our recovery is always going to be affected by our environment. Okay? So when we talk about recovery, we also have to manage where we do that, what support we have for our recovery. And again, if you think about it as a process, we're going to do better when we have what we need. Maybe even what we need is somebody to listen to us. You might need some counselling, or you might need some emotional support. You might need a massage. I know so many times my recovery has involved going to a spa and getting massages and doing lovely things like that. And the environment was so critical for those things. But sometimes it's almost impossible for us to recover if we don't have a strong, supportive, comfortable environment. And that's so important, because sometimes our recovery and what we could call the next stage, which is coming back to normal, kind of bounce off each other. So we recover a little bit, and then we can hopefully change our normal that supports us to then recover a little bit more. And one of the most important types of recovery there can be, I think, and a great achievement in life, is if we've come from a situation of abuse. Perhaps we've grown up in an environment where we receive emotional abuse or physical abuse or other abuse. And we take that as normal, we believe that's normal, and we turn it in on ourselves, we believe that we deserve that. And so a lot of our process is understanding that we deserve safety, we deserve love, we deserve comfort, we deserve kindness. We can't overvalue kindness. And as we grow and as we understand that those things are important to us and that we deserve them, we can give ourselves the grace of a wonderful home, great friends, confidants, counsellors, therapists, massage therapists. We start to give ourselves those gifts as we recover. But sometimes that recovery doesn't happen in one stage. It happens over and over again. And as we're growing and we're changing and we're adapting, what we do is we keep going through a cycle, but each time we're healing another aspect of whatever is holding us back from our authentic success. And I know I haven't mentioned authentic success and fear of success so much, but it's all part of our healing. When we are fully healed, we are successful. We have our authentic success because we're just being ourselves, and we have provided ourselves, we've created a life where it's safe to be ourselves. Yeah? So if you're gay, perhaps you have to make big changes. Perhaps you have to leave relationships. Perhaps you have to leave home. Perhaps you have to leave your work. Perhaps you have to leave your country in order to be truly safe to be yourself. So it's not necessarily an easy or quick process. And that recovery is something we need to recognize, whether we're recovering from, perhaps working too hard for 1 week, or perhaps being in a difficult or damaging relationship for years and years, perhaps for our whole life. And as we heal, even though we heal those relationships, sometimes, things fall backwards, and we can allow ourselves to be treated in a way that we haven't for a very long time. And we need to come back to our process. And we also need to forgive ourselves for allowing that behaviour again. Forgive ourselves for overworking. Forgive ourselves for allowing others to criticise us unfairly. Or even fairly. Sometimes we still don't need it. And our recovery is so often helped when we get into a beautiful space. Not for nothing are spas built beautifully. And not for nothing do we have spa voice when we talk very gently and easily about things that are not gentle and that are very, very difficult. So just take a moment to feel anywhere you might need to recover. Think about anywhere that you might find supportive for your recovery. And one of the things that often happens, and I've seen so many times in my fitness life, in going to spas, in going to spiritual retreats, going to trainings, to even going on my apprenticeship, is that very often when we come to these things, we feel that we're about to learn something, but what we're really doing is we're coming to a place where it's safe to collapse and to start to recover. So often we see a retreat, going on a beautiful retreat, as some kind of finish, and really it's just the beginning. So perhaps we collapse and then we go into recovery, and our next stage is normal. Now, normal is really whatever's normal for you, your normal, your choice. But of course, as a society, as a global culture, our normal is always changing, and our normal changes in different countries as well. So what we could say as well is that sometimes our recovery as individuals is not complete and cannot be complete until we recover as a society. So if we look at things that have been a big stigma for a long time, things like being gay, we could talk about racial differences, we could talk about gender arguments. Those things we can recover from whatever has happened for us. But we can't say that we're fully healed until our society heals also. And I say this because something I touched on before was about being a healer or a shaman, and how our culture has been very negative to that in the past. So we had a lot of people dying through witch hunts and a lot of prejudice. But a lot of that activity didn't really end 100 years ago. It's really been around even a few decades ago. So people who thought differently might have been locked up, might have been thought to be insane. And so it's really only very recently that we can start to talk about things that some people might call crazy, but which are recognised in many cultures around the world. And a big part of my healing was understanding that, was exploring and visiting those different cultures so that I could understand what healthy was, what healthy behaviour was, and what was unhealthy, which was pretending to be something that I wasn't. So our normal shifts and changes as we grow and as we heal. But what I would ask you to do as an exercise now is to consider what normal serves you, what you want to be your normal, your life. Do you want to change your working week? Do you want to change your environment at home? Whether it's putting in a few plants or moving house. Do you need to change your relationships? Stop spending time with some people? Do you need to do more training and education? Or maybe stop doing quite so much training and education? Your normal is something that you can consider and for the most part choose. And it's important to sit down and consider what is that safe environment that you can create for yourself where you can come back to normal and start exploring life more fully. What is the normal that supports you in your authentic success? Adapt or die, change or die. If you come to this place, this workshop, this retreat, usually it's because something just wasn't adding up, something just wasn't working. There was some misalignment where you didn't feel that you were really hitting your authentic success. You were really living your authenticity, being true to who you are. So it's your choice how you adapt. It's your choice who you want to be. Something that we need to understand when it comes to authentic success, life, and adaptation, our whole process, is the ego. And this goes by many names. Sometimes we can call it the parasite. Susan Jeffers called it the chatterbox. And I saw an advert the other day where it called it the mind mouse. Okay, but I think we now are starting to understand that very often we'll hear a little voice when we want to do something, and it will tell us, no, you can't go out in the rain. No, you can't go out in the dark. No, you can't do this. No, you can't leave this job. You can't get married. You can't go swimming. You know, anything. And that little voice, that ego, is something within us that has picked up everything that we need to know in this world in order to be safe. So sometimes I liken the ego as a bit like to a bodyguard or a personal assistant. And when we're young, we don't know about money, we don't know about laws, we don't know about how to drive, anything like that. And we learn all of those things so that we can survive, we can function in this world. So the ego has the big book of what you can and can't do. And it wants to keep us safe, because by keeping us safe, it keeps itself safe. So if you think about like a Secret Service agent that's trying to keep the president safe, it's always standing in front of them and saying, no, don't do anything dangerous. No, don't go here, don't go there. Or if you have to do it, I'm going to stand right here and whisper in your ear and try and protect you. It sounds so lovely, but of course, the ego can often become stifling. And we start to mistake the ego's voice for for our own inner voice, our own thinking, our own beliefs. And very often our ego has learned all this from other people around us. So if you listen very carefully to that ego, what you often hear is a recognizable voice. Perhaps it's the voice of your parents, your teachers, your sister saying, you can't do this, you can't do that. Be careful, be careful, be careful. And it also sometimes says more negative things like, you don't deserve this, or you're not working hard enough, or don't say that because people won't understand it or will criticize you, because it feels that that's safe. It feels like what we've done before is safe, and what is out there and new and exciting might not be safe. But I was really heartened when I was going through this myself, and I was finding it so, so difficult. And I had this really strong feeling. And just as I came to the understanding, I picked up a book by Don Magara Wiz, which was The Voice of Knowledge. He calls the ego, what I call the ego, he calls the voice of knowledge. Our desire is to explore, and the ego's desire is to stay safe. So there's a conflict. And if we work at it, what we can do is we harness the ego. Okay? We're never going to live a life where we can let go of all ego unless we go and live in like an ashram, in a community where everybody understands that we're trying to let go of the ego because we need to put on clothes. The more we understand the ego, the more we understand this companion that we have in life, and we learn to live with that companion, we can say shh, shh, whenever we like. And one of the things that we can do is to listen deeply to our ego, not without discrimination, not listening to it and doing everything that it says, but listening to it and understanding where it comes from, understanding, is there a point there? But ultimately making our own decisions about whether we choose to stay home, stay safe, or whether we decide it's worth the risk to go out and explore. Sometimes it feels so much easier to just pretend to be what we're not. Sometimes we have to be in order to survive. Sometimes we have to pretend to be anything other than who we are. But when we get past that, it doesn't help us to keep going with that coping strategy, with that survival strategy, that adaptation. Sometimes when we've been inside or hiding in other ways for so long, we just get so comfortable with it. It feels really safe and comfortable in here. It makes me feel like I don't actually want to get outside. I don't want to go out. I want to just stay here hiding. And that's a huge thing that we do in life, to avoid life. Even though we know it's so wonderful when we finally come out. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch these videos, to do these workshops, and I really hope that they've helped you to connect with your authentic success. It is your choice, it is your journey. If you want to keep going, if you need time to rest and recover, it's your choice how much ego you allow in your life. As I said, we all need a little bit of ego in this life, unless we want to go and live in a naked Free for Life ashram. It's your choice how much you want to live with. And if you want to join me on retreat, get in touch, let me know. If you want to train as a Fear of Success instructor, because we come together with compassion and we support each other on this journey. Because I've never done any journey in my life where I wasn't supported by other people. And sometimes when we do that journey and we maintain that awareness of that journey, we really can see how many people are there for us, rooting for us, willing us to be able to connect with our authentic success. Because even though things get confusing and love gets confusing, we do love each other all unconditionally. And it's so wonderful when we move in our own directions. Sometimes we go together, sometimes we have to go in different directions. But that joy of authenticity is something that we share. And I always say that when we do this work, overcoming fear of success, tapping into our authentic success, which is the same as being taught by all these wonderful teachers, we don't heal alone. You know, when we heal the world, and it gets shared with everyone else. So by doing this work, just by living it, we share it with the world and we change the world. Take care, and I hope to see you again. Namaste.